Good morning, friends. My name is Amber Severance, and I am a Sonlight curriculum consultant who you can see at some of the conventions that I attend in the summers with Sonlight. I also am a mentor on Sonlight's app, and those are the two hats that I wear for Sonlight. In my regular life, I'm a mom of five, and four have graduated from my homeschool, and I am currently homeschooling an eighth grader. So this is my sixth time through eighth grade, and I'm still learning things. Isn't that the way it is? I'm so thankful. Um, I feel really honored to have been asked to spend a few minutes with you each morning, sharing God's word with you as a way to kick off each day's retreat here at Sonlight. And to start off our week this Monday morning, I would like to challenge us about our minds and about what you dwell on. And I'd like to take a look at what the Apostle Paul, inspired by the Holy Spirit, has asked us to dwell on. I know if you're human and anything like me, you might tend to give in to feelings of failure and to feel fearful and overwhelmed. And sometimes the thoughts that we have bombarding our minds can really derail us. I think it's really a kindness of the Lord that he gave us a verse like Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. And I'm going to read that for us in a second. But first, let's just remember the book of Philippians is such a huge book of encouragement. Paul talks to us in it about Christ's humility, how he came to this earth, emptied himself, became nothing for us. In Philippians, we are admonished to do everything without grumbling and complaining. We're encouraged to rejoice always and to not worry about anything, but to give everything to God through prayer. And the peace of Christ which surpasses understanding, will guard our hearts and our minds in Christ Jesus. And tucked in all of that is a gem, Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. And it goes like this: finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any moral excellence, and if there is anything praiseworthy, dwell on these things. Oh, do you love that? So here's Paul, and he says, here's a checklist for you. When you have a thought, run it through these questions. Is it true, honorable, right? Is it pure and lovely and admirable? Think on things that are excellent, morally excellent, and worthy of praise. So my question for you as we start off this week is, and my question for me, how's my thought life? Am I dwelling on things that are like that? The first one, let me just pick on that first one, because I can almost stop a lot of bad thoughts just right there. And it is whatever is true. I don't know about you, but I spend a lot of time thinking about things that aren't true. Things in the past that cannot be changed, regretting or wishing I could change them somehow, but it's not true. It's the past. It's not real. Or I'll spend a lot of times about the future. What if this happens? What if that happens? I really hope this happens. I really hope that happens. Guess what? The future isn't true. It's not real. It hasn't happened. And so the amount of time that I spend not just thinking about things that are abjectly false, right? Lies from the enemy that can get into my head. But the amount of time I might think about regretting the past or fast forwarding to the future, those two things are not reality. They're not real. What is real is today. And today's reality is that God is here and his mercies are new every single morning. And tomorrow morning, when I wake up, his mercies will be new that day, and then the next day, and the next day for all of my future. So instead of future tripping and worrying or regretting or longing for the past or longing for whatever it is, guys, I need to think about what is true and real today and right now. When I was newly married, I would spend time thinking that my husband was dead on the side of the road somewhere when he would show up late for a meal. It just wasn't true. I expended a lot of energy and tears worrying and wondering. Done the same with my children. My boys were little. I pretty much was sure that one of them would end up in jail someday. I didn't know. I was just so afraid and it let my mind go. But how about you? Are you dwelling on truth? How about if you took some time, maybe it's been a while since you've opened your Bible and really studied it for yourself. What if you took some time and used a great Bible study app like Blue Letter Bible? Don't know if you've heard of that. And you took Philippians chapter 4, verse 8, and you went word by word and studied those words, what they are in the Greek, other places they appear in the New Testament, and ask yourself, am I filling my mind with things that God wants me to dwell on? He's told me right here in Philippians chapter 4, verse 8, the kinds of things he wants me to dwell on. Things that are true. How about honorable? Are the things you're thinking about pure? Are they lovely? Are they full of bitterness or animosity towards someone? Are the things that you're dwelling on morally excellent? How are you entertaining yourself, moms? Maybe some dads who are here with us today. How are you entertaining yourself? What kind of podcasts are you listening to? What kind of movies are you watching? What kind of books are you reading? What kind of relationships are most dear to you? Are they ones that are encouraging you to think with moral excellence? How about the kinds of standards that you want to develop in your own life so that you can help your kids develop standards for their lives? Are we dwelling on things that would please Christ and would lead to that peace that he promises us? So as we get started this week, I just want to point you to this truth of God's word and to challenge you and me. What are you dwelling on? What are you dwelling on? And as we move through this week, I hope that each day I can bring you a little something that will be an encouragement to you. And I would love to just pray with you to get our week started off. God in heaven, thank you for the chance to spend a little time each morning with these precious friends. God, we need help. Our minds are a battlefield, and we are very tempted often to think on things that are not true and that are not honorable, things that aren't lovely or worthy of praise. And we want to change that, God. By the power of your Holy Spirit, will you help us to think on things that are true and real and lovely? Help us to dwell on these things. Thank you for the peace and the protection for our minds that you promise as we listen and obey you. In your name I pray. Amen. Thanks, and we will see you tomorrow.
Hello and welcome to day one of our Run the Race retreat. We are so glad you're here. And you'll see this week, the whole retreat is all about running a race because just like a runner trains before completing a race, we really wanted to provide you with tools to ensure a better homeschool journey and help you run your homeschool race well. So whether you're watching and you're just considering homeschooling or you've been doing it for many, many years, there's going to be something for everyone in these sessions, and we really want to encourage you no matter where you are on that journey. Also, everything is being recorded, so if you're watching us live, you will be able to access all this information later. But if you are watching live, make sure to tell us where you're tuning in from, interact with us in the comments. We are in there live with you as well, and we would love to answer any questions you have or interact with you. But even if you're watching a recording of this later, go ahead and post in the comments if you need anything, because we will still be monitoring that as well and would love to help you out. But let's start with some introductions. Christy, you're on top, so I'll let you go first. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Christy, and this is our 15th year, something like that, of Sonlight. And we have four boys, two in college and two in high school.
Thank you for being here. Jen, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Jen. I use Sonlight for 23 years. I have two adulting, one in college and one in high school. And yeah, we're glad to be here and, happy to try to encourage all of you who are still at it.
Absolutely. And I am Sunny. I'm Sonlight's community manager, so I get to spend a lot of time interacting with all of you using Sonlight, but I'm also an active homeschool mom to two children, ages 14 and 9. I started homeschooling my firstborn in preschool, thinking I would do it for a year or two, and we fell in love with it. And here we are all these years later, still doing it, and we've added another child since then. So we've learned to kind of pivot and roll with the punches as they come. But I love sharing my experience with everyone, but then also getting great ideas from other Sunlighters around me. So we're excited to be here and encourage you today. Let's jump right in. This topic is all, we're using all the running analogies this week. So it's about getting off the starting blocks. But it's not just for those of you who are starting homeschooling. It absolutely applies to you. But anytime you feel that you've had to reset, maybe you feel like you're starting over again, or you've had some situations come up in life where it just feels like you're back to square one, you're starting from the beginning. We're going to help walk you through that and get you back on track and get you motivated and running that race again. So let's start with doubt. This is something that people deal with all the time. I can't do this. I'm failing. I'm a horrible homeschool mom, whatever that feeling is that people are telling themselves right now. How would you encourage them and help them move beyond that phase?
I think even people who start off with the most confidence, we all experience seasons of doubt. And some of that is on the front end, and some of that we start out and we think, oh, we've got this, and then it hits us. But all of us, it's no one is alone in doubt. We all have at some point along the way. And so I think I would encourage with that. And also when I've chatted with people over the years in the booth or in mentoring, you hear all sorts of background on that doubt. Just like with a runner, it's the head game that can get you going or that can slow you down. It's the same with homeschooling. I think that I have this many children, or I only have one child, or whatever the reason for doubting. I think that there are lots of reasons, and they're opposites. So it's not like the opposite of your situation would be the perfect situation. I just think that it's a head game, and it's knowing that we all experience it, and it's a part of this the gig. It comes with it, doesn't it?
It really does. I think it's helpful to remember that good or what do they say? Perfect is the enemy of good. That it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to look perfect. There's no day where you can just check the box and be like, this is an automatic success. Like you chip away at the instructor's guide, you chip away at each book. Sometimes it the kids just don't cooperate. Sometimes it just doesn't feel, it's just like running. Sometimes it just doesn't feel great. You do it and you grit your teeth and you power through. And sometimes it just hurts and isn't fun all day. And then 2 days later, it's a complete joy and you can't even believe how lucky you are to get to do this. And that's totally normal. That is totally 100% normal. But perfect is the enemy of good. You can be doing a very good job. It's not going to be perfect, but you can't concentrate on that.
And it's unpredictable because some days you go out and you've been having a great day and you've been having a great day. And I can remember running cross country. That happened to me. One day I would just go out and I would be like, what in the world? I can't even, nothing's working and I feel horrible. And it was so good the other day. What's different? And you can't put your finger on it. Same thing. There are days that you just, for whatever reason, it doesn't seem to be going the way that it was working before. So that happens as well. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a tendency personally, if I see something, I'm like, oh yeah, I could do that. I'm a little overconfident initially. I'm kind of the opposite. I don't go into it thinking I can't do it. And then I get in there and I'm like, oh, I just dove off the pier and I don't know how to swim. Like one of those situations where I'm like, now what do I do? And I kind of go into panic mode a little bit. And I love what you guys said. That's totally normal depending on your personality too. I think some people are more prone to this or reacting differently to it. But just remember that you love your children. You've been given these children. I don't think we can say that enough times that you do want what's best for them. And so you really cannot fail with that goal in mind. And then, of course, reach out to your support system around you. If you feel like you're struggling and you can't do something because there's not enough hours in the day, don't be afraid to ask for help to get everything done. I think sometimes that's why we feel like we can't homeschool maybe, or we can't do that is because, oh, we have all these other responsibilities too. And you can outsource things. You can ask for help. It doesn't have to be you doing everything, to keep your family running or your children's lives running or whatever it may be. But let's talk about combating worry and kind of figuring out what's in your control and what's not. I know my tendency is to be very type A. I love order and things that are very organized and ready to go. And I remember during the pandemic, I realized how little I really can control, whether that be in the situations around me or, when you're homeschooling children, they have different personalities. They're not going to think exactly like you do. That I realized, wait, I'm not really in control of a whole lot of things. That's an illusion. But how do you combat some of that worry or figure out what you can control, what you can't, what you should let go of, and prioritizing those things?
This one is a lesson I learned, and I thought it was a homeschool lesson. And as it turns out, it's a life lesson. So if you are visually oriented, picture like two circles, one inside the other. These are the things within my sphere of influence. Everything outside that is not within my sphere of influence. And if it is not within my sphere of influence, I no longer have the bandwidth to get jazzed about that. Like the weather, I go grocery shopping or I don't, but like I can't control the weather. I cannot control children's attitudes. I can, put them back to bed. I can feed them. I can exercise them. I can do the things that should correct their attitudes. I can give them choices and have consequences that match those choices. But like, I can't fix other people. I can't make them like a book. I can't make them love math. I've said to my kids 1 bazillion times, you don't have to want to, you only have to do it. But like, if it is not within my sphere of influence, that's a bummer.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to say at the beginning of 2024 here. Going into an uncertain year, if you live in these United States or anywhere in this world, there's going to be, in any beginning of the year, we don't know what's going to happen. And there are things that are outside of our sphere of influence, but it's really powerful when you really think about that. And then you just zoom in on your people, and then you put everything you have into them. There's something very powerful about that frees my heart in a way that nothing else does, pouring into the people around me. When I can't do about anything about maybe something you've read in a book that really moves you, and you see how it impacts, and it can really, that's heavy to me when I do that and look at current events, the things that we're studying in history. But when I pour into the people around me, I think that's the biggest thing that really that helps me out. But I think also thinking about academics with our kids, it would be really nice if we could just give a syllabus to the child B and C and D and say, well, this is what worked with A, and so here's what we're going to do. But it doesn't exactly work like that. Every one of our children comes unique in their own package, and so we can't exactly hand out the syllabus and have the expectations that are the same for everyone. It doesn't work that way. So I think that adjusting as we go, no, that's beyond our control. Every child is different. Their strengths and weaknesses are different. How they're going to tackle this subject, what their motivation level is going to be on any given day, all of those things. And so there are things that we can do to help and to help them along and coach and build and plant and all those things that we do as homeschool moms, but there's quite a bit that's outside of our control.
And so if we choose gratitude every day and choose joy every day, and then, like you said, focus on the things we can control, we can fit the lesson to the kid. We can pour into our children because that is what we can control. And that comes to like life lesson number 18, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. But when mama is focused, or whoever the homeschool adult is focused and joyful and like loving this homeschool life, the kids just soak that up.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Yeah. And you model the behavior you want, right? Like your kids, they're not adults. They don't have the same perspective you have. They don't have the same control over their emotions. But if they see you doing it, they'll catch that behavior over time. And I know something that I talk about with my kids when they start fighting with each other is the whole, you can't control what your brother or sister said or did there. That's on them. What you can control is your response to what they said or did. So instead of letting things get hostile or returning like behavior with like behavior, I have to remind myself of this with my teenager when I start getting attitude thrown at me, is I can't respond the same way, right? I'm the adult. I can control myself a little better sometimes when the emotions are high. And so I need to remember that, and remain calm, because again, I can only control my own behavior at that time or my response. And I love one of you said, I think it was you, Jen, you said that you can feed them, put them back to bed, or exercise them. If you as mom or dad, the parent in the room, are feeling stressed and you're reacting in an unfavorable way, it may be that you need one of those, food, a nap, you need to walk away, you need your own time. I tell my kids, I'm like, if the door is closed, mommy just needs introvert time. Like it's not that I don't want you with me. It's just we've spent a lot of togetherness and I don't want to get frustrated with you later. So just give me these 20 minutes by myself with my Kindle, and then I will come out and be happy and it will be good. So know yourself, know what works for you, and make sure that, especially if you've got lots of littles and they're climbing all over you all day and you're very touched out, that you are aware of that, and that you're able to make the modifications that you need to get your head on straight. Let's talk a little bit about establishing that strong foundation, though. I think this, we kind of already touched on some of those things you might need to do to make sure you're in a good frame of mind. But let's talk about some of the ways to establish a strong foundation. Let's start spiritually. Obviously, any issue we're having, we can take to God in prayer. But what are some good ideas to make sure that maybe we're in the right frame of mind when we start our homeschool day from a spiritual standpoint?
Yeah, I think that's been different in different seasons, like what it is that I need that just establishes that strong foundation. I mean, obviously the same thing overall, but it's looked different in different seasons. And I think that there are seasons that as my children have gotten older, I've found I didn't know how thirsty I was for God's word, really, because you go through these years of busyness where it's all hands on deck. And at least it was at our house, because we have four and they were pretty close in age. And then you look up and you're like, what just happened? And we kind of scaled back on any kind of, like, if I was doing a women's Bible study, I would do the one that wasn't the big deep, really in depth. And then when I was able to get back to that, I mean, we did have a solid Bible study that wasn't so in depth, and I enjoyed that. And it was made for moms, and a lot of grace for the mamas. And I loved that. But then whenever I was able to get back to that, more in depth Bible study, I told the ladies in the group, I had no idea how thirsty I was, and I'm just taking it all in. And it's so encouraging. So I think it looks different in different seasons, don't you think? What it is that you need. But I think just having some, that regular, and I pray about it as I go into a new season, a new year, a new semester, or whatever. I look at everything and what, and pray about what, what I want to have going on this semester. And of course, it doesn't always go according to my plan, but checking myself to see, am I, sometimes I've mentioned this this week to someone else, actually, that just putting in my calendar, am I, whatever it is, whatever your spiritual goal for that strong foundation is, I put that in my calendar sometimes, just ask myself questions in the margins of my calendar or IG or my planner, whatever it is that you have at your house. And just that keeps me on track.
Well, and Sunny, what you said before, I think fits in beautifully with what Christy just said. Your children will catch your behaviors, your habits, your attitude. If I expect my kids to be able to control their emotions, to take the time they need to sleep well, to, do all those self-care things, and to not just as a reward, but as a part of their own routine, and they're taking care of their own physical health and mental health and spiritual health, then they need to see me do it. I can't say, you need to take care of your own health in all these ways, but I'm too busy because I'm the mom. And so I'm not going to show you how to you can say that, but they won't, that's what they'll catch. Mm-hmm. And so there were a lot of years, because Christy, it changes in every season. Am I right? Mm-hmm. I swam several times a week, or I went running, not because I'm a super runner girl. I am not, but nobody could find me. Nobody said, mom, 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 mom. The whole time I was running, the longer I ran, the longer nobody was talking to me. I was outside in the sunshine, getting tired, using my body, with that blood pumping. It's so good for my thinking. It's so good for the rest of my day. I sleep better when I exercise. And so even taking 20 or 30 minutes to just take care of me for a second, helps so much. It's not always that. Sometimes, like Sunny, you said, me and my Kindle in a room, door closed, I'll be back. Sometimes it's can you just let me clean the kitchen? Because if the counters are clean, then I can think. I cannot think in this mess. That might just be me. I don't know. But I literally cannot think in this mess. If I have a big project to do, I have to clean whatever room I'm doing first, and then I can do the thing. Whatever it takes, but putting something in every day where you can say to yourself and to your children, I need to do this for me to be balanced, healthy, stable, calm, whatever. Give me a minute. I'll be right back. I will be happy to be the mom the rest of the day. I just need a few minutes to take care of me. And I mean, what I see in my adult kids is that they're I need a few minutes. I'm going to go. One plays soccer, one goes to the gym, one, they read, they have journals, they do all these things. And, it's important to be able to keep yourself on track, especially as moms, because we have people to be an example for.
Exactly. I agree. And I remember the first time I heard those things identified as self-care, I was picturing like spa days. And I was like, what? I can't do that. I don't have time for that. But like you said, Jen, it's just walking away for a few minutes. It's exercising, it's going outside. I know for me, I've always been more of an indoor girl. I don't love being outside, but the mood lift you get when you spend 10 minutes in the sun, I mean, it's amazing. And I know, Christy, you were talking about different levels of Bible study. This is something that, yeah, depending on your season, I love to read. I'm really kind of that nerdy, like I want to study. I think that's why I enjoy homeschooling because I get to learn all the time. And there was a period in my life where I was like, I don't have time to, really get in and look at like Greek root words and things like that, which is, I mean, I'm like hardcore nerd when it comes to some of my Bible studies. But I was like, so what do I do instead? Like I don't have that kind of time. And yeah, I love what you said about, a Bible study at your church. That's a great place for community that also provides some accountability if you find that you're having a hard time sticking with it. But there's definitely been seasons where it's been our Sonlight Bible reading, and that's it. And, little prayers throughout the day of God, help me with this. Help me with this. I need this help. And so yeah, depending on the season you're in, I think that's something important to remember that God's there with whatever level you're able to put in. And with Bible apps available, you can just play it and let somebody else read it to your students, and you're in the room just catching what you can. And there will be those times when, as your kids get older, when they start to do more of their own extracurricular activities, you're able to, really dive deep and do the things that you want to do. But Christy, you mentioned setting goals, which I think is good. Sometimes we think about, oh, I want to set this goal to learn something or to do something, right? Exercise, of course, is a huge goal for a lot of people, especially in the new year when they're making resolutions. But it's important to remember those spiritual goals as well. Let's talk a little bit about community too, because that's another way that you can really lay a stronger foundation. I think sometimes we try to homeschool alone. We've got this, right? We're teaching, so we're not even relying on a school to teach our kids. So sometimes we kind of pull in and try to do everything, but community is such an important piece of living just in general, but I think especially when you're homeschooling. So what are some ideas for people maybe that are looking for that support from other people too?
Yeah, I think it's important to, again, customize this for where you are, and don't try to plan for all the years ahead right now. Plan this year, this semester, what is working, what is not, what needs to happen, how can you shore things up if you've sometimes we've gone too far in adding too many things to our schedule, and we find ourselves, wow, we need to cut back. And then other times we've cut back so much that we're like, oh, wow, okay, we need to readjust, in the other direction. So I think it's really good just to have a time, maybe at the beginning of a semester, to evaluate where you are, what's going on, and talk to some other people. I know in my kids' early years, a group of moms at the park, we were talking one day and we were like, co-op is killing us. I mean, we're just so worn down by all the rules, and it's lovely. I get that it's a good thing for kids a little bit older than ours, but I'm not sure that it's really great for the younger siblings. What should we do? And we just got together and decided we're going to rebel against co-op. And so we got together and we, nothing against co-op. I love co-op. But it's better for a later season for me, and the early seasons especially when I had little ones, for me, if it was a co-op that involved a lot of commitment on the part of a mom, then that was hard for my little guys. Not so much for me. I would be glad to do that all day, but it was just, it wasn't the best fit for my younger guys. And just being honest about that and finding something that was better. At one point, we all signed up for PE at the Y, and they had a homeschool PE class, and we went to that. At one point, we just had park days that we did on our own. At one point, we met at one of the ladies' houses and we had breakfast together, and we had a homeschool teenager from the community that came. It was all in the distance where we could see the kids out there with the homeschool teenager. We paid her a little bit. All of us chipped in. We had breakfast together. The kids played together. They had a blast with their friends. We got to have one of the host, the lady that was hosting was just so hospitable, and she had a little, had a Bible study planned, and then we chatted and visited, and it was perfect. It's just what we needed. And also getting involved in the community was good for us, looking around, what needs can we meet together as a family? How can we reach out? We had a lot of homelessness happening in one season, and that was burdening me. And so when I find something that I'm burdened about, I want to do something about that. And that helps. And so we got involved in and getting to know people in the community and reaching out and being a part of something that was burden. My guys are older now, and we adjust every regularly. We start to say, okay, we're off balance again. What should we do now? What should we do differently? We're doing too many things. Let's cut something, So
yeah, we have found community kind of like Christy everywhere. I mean, different things at different seasons, but sometimes it's a homeschool group, whether it's a co-op situation or just like a, mom support group. We've found community at church, not necessarily just homeschoolers, but like older people who just love my kids. Those people are absolutely invaluable. We've done everything from family small groups to we found community a lot in whatever activities my kids were doing. My son played on a soccer team that was really stable, like same coaches, mostly the same kids for like 5 years. And those people ended up being a strong community. I have another one in theater, which is mostly adults, and he's a teen. And so now he has all these adults who have kind of taken him under their wing. And so when somebody needs something, or something needs to be built or unbuilt or painted or hauled, or, just whatever, like, if they have a running club that, one of the theater people is involved in and they need blah, 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 he calls my son and he's like, hey, can you come do this thing with me on Saturday? And, just having other adults to be around my kids. We, most years that we homeschooled, did not find happiness and success in a standard co-op. I think because my kids are, like I have 4 kids, but over 11 years. And so if it worked for the oldest one, it didn't work for the youngest one. If it worked for the younger ones, then the older ones were bored, right, Christy? I mean, hello. So, but we've also found community just in like the community, just regular people we know from this place or that place. And very often I've called and said, I have a kid who wants to help with this or help with that, or it's Christmas, what can we do to serve the community? And there's always somebody to say, oh, well, come do what we're doing. So we've kind of had to get outside the homeschool community for that. Honestly, I think the pandemic really ruined a lot of community that we feel like we're still rebuilding. And so it's really like, this has been a season of really hard times in terms of like feeling like we still have our whole community, which is hard. It's just hard.
I think it's good to note, though, that I think that's the case, not just in the homeschool community in general. Yeah. Kids that are I know high schoolers that are in public school, private school, and I think across the board there's some of that going on. I'm seeing that across the board, and figuring out how to connect and do the things we were doing before.
Well,
right.
And
in
I think
similar way.
Yeah. Well, and I think with the rise of social media and like online games and things like that too, the way people communicate and the things they do is definitely different. You mentioned teenagers. I think being a teenager is hard oftentimes anyway. And so, yeah, I think especially today's teens are being bombarded with so much information and things that they're seeing online that just, I don't know. We were a little more sheltered when we were young because we didn't see all of everything. I know, Christy, you mentioned the weight of the world when you see what's going on in other places. Sometimes that can be very, very hard to handle when you just sit there and ruminate on things. But I love what you both said, that the different activities that your kids have been involved in aren't necessarily just with kids their own age. I think that is one of the beauties of homeschooling, is that They will. Homeschooled kids will talk to people of any age. I remember we were at a breakfast at our church that was for all of the ministry workers in the children's ministry. And we went along. My husband and I don't volunteer in the children's ministry, but our teenage daughter does. And so she got to bring us along with her. And she said, "Oh, let me introduce you to my friend Jan." And I was expecting Jan to be around her age. And she walks over with a woman somewhere between my mom and my age. And I was like, how lovely that at like 13 or 14, she referred to her as, "This is my friend Jan." There was no age barrier there, and it didn't matter that she was older than her own parents were. I think sometimes when I was in high school, anybody, even my parents' age, I would have been like, "Oh, they're so old," or, like it just was a different mindset, a different outlook. And so, yeah, I think homeschooled kids, they learn to interact with people of all ages, and they can be involved in lots of different things, both with and without you. And I love that you guys brought those up, because I've always been a working mom. We never did the traditional co-op thing either, just because I'm not available at 10 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, or, when they oftentimes meet. But through my kids' extracurricular activities, volunteer, community outreach, all those types of things, we've never had any issues with them finding friends, homeschooled or not. So definitely look for those options. And then, of course, our online Sonlight Connections community is here as well. So if you live in an area where you're like, there is no one, maybe you're way out in a rural area, and there's just no one else around, we are still here online for you and would love to interact with you. Our Sonlight community is both mentors who have done it for a long time, but then also those who are just other homeschool families like yourself. So you can get all sorts of ideas and encouragement from them. But let's talk about that when you need help. Sometimes I don't know if we're scared to ask for help, or maybe we feel like we're failing if we need somebody else's help. What do you do if you are struggling with something and you kind of feel like you've exhausted all your resources and you still need help with that situation?
Well, definitely the Sonlight app is the first place I would go. And as a mentor, I love to answer questions. It's really easiest for us when people just give a lot of details. I have an 8-year-old kid. This is what we're using for math. This is what level we're on. This is how it's going. We hit this subject and all of a sudden XYZ happened, because one of us has done that. We've all had an 8-year-old kid. Somebody has used that program. Somebody has hit that wall. I can tell you, exactly where the walls were in our math programs. And it's so easy when there's several people to say, "Oh, well, have you tried this?" Or "There's a resource for this." Or, it could be that if you go back and, revisit this topic, then coming back to the one you're struggling with gets a lot easier, or whatever. But the Sonlight app, the Sonlight online services have always been just completely the best.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes if you need to speak to someone, you need another voice on the other side of the line. The advisors are great. I didn't always, in the beginning, turn to that resource, and I might be frustrated about something for a little while before I finally reached out and thought, "Oh yeah, wait a minute." It took me a minute to remember in the middle of the craziness of the semester or whatever. Oh, we have a resource. They made a big deal out of that for some reason. And the reason is because it's really helpful. So the Sonlight Cares, your advisors, you can reach out to them, and they have never not encouraged me. Every time I've called them, even if it's just a little tweak, it's a little something that, just sometimes a little change goes a long way. But it's what Jen said, that someone's been there before and they know the answer to, "Oh yes, this question." Sometimes I would ask a question, I would say, "I know this is kind of a crazy question, and I hear this all the time now." "Oh no, people ask this question pretty much every day." It's very common. All kinds of resources. So if you would like to speak to someone, you can do that with your advisor on the phone, with an advisor on the phone.
Not only do you get your answer, but you get the encouragement of knowing that it was not a crazy question and you are not the only one. And, everybody else has faced this too.
Yeah, and don't be scared to post that because, like you said, somebody else has probably thought it, experienced it too. I'm always amazed when somebody posts a question, just the variety of responses too. Things that I'm like, oh, yeah, I've done this, but I haven't tried that. And so you can kind of put those things in your pocket for later if you're like, oh, I might come in to this situation again and so recommended this, or, oh, my system this year all of a sudden quit working after years of being great. Let me go get in there and see what other people are doing. And so, yeah, I still get great ideas from the community, even though, if you asked me a few years ago, I'd be like, oh, I've got this, but you just never know, right? Everything changes. There's new seasons all the time. Let's talk about those tips, though, for making progress no matter what's going on. Because I know some people watching might be saying, oh, the reason I feel like I'm starting over is because we had this big crisis in our family, something major happened. I can't get back on track. I feel like my whole year is ruined. What are some tips to just get back going again, start running again, if you feel like you've fallen down, just to kind of keep people moving along the right path? Obviously, it may not look the same as it has in the past for them, but getting them back off and going again.
So the first thing I always tell people is start. Pick up the next book and start reading it. And an object in motion stays in motion. So if you get started, like with that running analogy, if you just put the shoes on, walk down the driveway, turn right, keep going, like you're halfway there already. So just start. The second thing after just starting is make a couple of short-term goals. Okay, we've gotten totally off track. We had a huge medical crisis, move, baby, illness, you name it. What can we accomplish this week, this month? How can we just set goals to get restarted so that we feel like we're in the groove again? And once you're in the groove, you can set longer term goals. What do we need to do this semester? What do I want to finish this year? But at the beginning, set tiny little short-term goals. Just start doing like a couple of math problems, then a couple more, then a couple more. Start reading something. And once you're moving, it's easier to stay moving.
Mm-hmm. And I would say prioritize. So if you come to a season that you have something, whatever it is going on, I would say prioritize what's most important. What are my non-negotiables? Okay. In my house, that tends to be, we do Bible in the morning. Then let's say we write something every day, like put pencil to paper in some way. It may not be as much every day as another day, but pencil to paper in some form or fashion. And I would say start with whatever you've progressed the least in. So like if you're on week 16 of one thing and week 20 of another, then go with the 16, unless that's just killing the love of everything. And then maybe just 16 can be on hold and you can, do what you need to do. But I would say trying to make progress where you prioritize what you're doing here. Reading something every day. That's pretty much. And then math, we typically keep going in math. We do the math, we check the math. We do the math, we check the math. It happens like riding a bicycle. Just keep going. And there may be days that you, just set the timer and you only do it for a certain amount of time and it's not as much as another day. That's fine. But just accomplishing, those things, prioritize what's most important. And then know that if you are on week 20 in something and week 16 in something else, I tend to go to the week 16 and catch up with the week 20, and week 20 can hang out and wait for us.
Well, and on the heels of that, homeschooling, again, with the running, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And so one of the pieces of advice, I always got a lot of questions in the booth about like, oh, I'm failing at science. I'm failing at writing. We're so hard on ourselves as mom. We know exactly what we stink at. And I tell people the same thing every time: stink at something different every year. So if science just was like, we watched science experiments and hardly did any, I had a baby, we moved, I just couldn't even, fine, no big. 1 year will not kill anybody. But next year, that's first. Science is first. And then I guarantee you something else will fall by the wayside. You will know what didn't quite get accomplished next year too. And then the following year, that is a priority. So that over the course of several years, you've done everything 85%, which is way better than no science for 5 years.
Yeah.
And maybe the hardest thing, or the thing that that thing that you're stinking at that you want to get done, if you are planning to do that this year, maybe start with that at the beginning of change it and where it is in the schedule. If the things that I was having a hard time tackling, whether it was math or language arts or whatever it was in any given year, I tended to move the thing I wanted to get out of the way to the beginning of the day. That helped tremendously because that's when we had the most energy. If I tried to do it in the afternoon, it just wasn't going to happen sometimes. Sometimes that was, and during the time that season where I started getting really sleepy in the afternoons, I couldn't do read alouds in the afternoons there for a while. I mean, no amount of coffee was going to help me. I had to move that up into the morning.
See, and I went the other way because I have night owls. So if we had something I had to concentrate on with one kid, I saved it for like evening soccer practice. So at brother's evening soccer practice, we sat in the van and we did whatever the thing was, because then I had you alone for an entire hour. And by 5 or 6 o'clock, like we were revved up, where first thing in the morning, we're not first thing in the morning people. So that was a terrible idea, but like it works great in your house. So sometimes you just got to try stuff and see if you're morning people or not.
But anytime you have a captive audience, like Jen said, anytime you have a captive audience, that's great. When you have one at piano lesson for an hour, and that's great. Yeah,
exactly.
That's prime time, baby. Yeah,
I have done so much car school. Yes, when another child is adolescent. Something that I found too is just making the schoolwork really accessible. So if I have to go into the other room to get it off the bookshelf, but I'm in the living room, it's much easier to turn on the TV or get out a game or do something that isn't school. However, if I keep the read aloud, the reader, all of that stuff right where I can see it, we're going to sit down and we're going to read before we do those other things. Because I'm working during the day, I do teach my kids afternoon, evening. And so sometimes at the end of the workday, it's like, okay, I don't really want to do school. But if it's sitting right there, obvious, it's like, oh, well, of course, I can pick this up and we can knock out a few chapters. It's not a big deal. We also have storage in our dining chair cushions. And so my son keeps his MacBook, his handwriting, a dry erase board, like all the work that he does independently in that chair. So that if he is in that room eating, which if you have a boy, you know, boys oftentimes, in my case, he eats, it feels like 10 times a day. It's that reminder, if we see him at the table and he doesn't have his schoolwork out, it's like, oh, hey, grab your math book. It's in your chair. Get it out. Let's start working on it. And so for us, that's been super helpful. I don't really micromanage my kids' schedule. My teenager works in the middle of the night because that's what works well for her. But it's more, here's what needs to be done. How are we going to get this done? And as long as we're doing something, you will find if you sneak it in that it's actually relatively easy to, you will find those moments, whether it's adolescent, in the middle of the night, before you would be going to bed. That's a great time to have a discussion. I feel like teenagers love to do that. So look at your kids and kind of see, okay, what works well for this student. And yeah, any of that one-on-one time, I think, especially with multiple kids. I only have two, but they both do better when there's not the distraction of their sibling walking in and out, jumping in, interjecting, asking me questions, all of that. So if you can find that time in your day, even if you have a lot of children, to do something individually, you'll get more done, I think, in less time. Speaking of time, we are running low on it. So before we wrap up, do you guys have any last minute words of advice or encouragement to those watching today?
My encouragement is that you are the perfect parent for your child. That we can give you advice, we can tell you what our experience is, but you know your kids. You are more invested in your kids than anybody else. You want their success more than anybody else on the planet. So even when you are doubting yourself, remember that you are the perfect parent for your kids, and you can trust yourself to walk them through this and make decisions because you can.
Mm-hmm. And I think be willing to find what works. As while Sunny was talking about her daughter, schooling late at night, that might make you go, but they need good sleep and they need that, like I hear those kind of things. And I do think that you have to know your child. You have to know what works in different seasons. And I encourage you that I worried a little bit about my oldest when he was, staying up late. I was thinking, well, how is this going to work when he goes away to school? And he adjusted. He had to be on a team. And when he signed up for this team, my eyes were kind of like, okay, because he's a total night owl. And the team practice was he had to be up at 4. They adjust. But find what works in the season and don't be afraid to. There is science behind the fact that teenagers are up at night, and there's a hormonal reason for all of that happening. But think out of the box and think about what works for them. And they can get plenty of sleep. They can still get that sleep that they need. It just may look a little differently than what you think it might, what you might be very extremely comfortable with. Find what works.
Yes, I agree. That's what I was going to say, is find out what works for your individual kids, what works for them, what works for you as the parent, and then ignore the feedback from other people. Because like you said, Christy, like morning people, for whatever reason, do not understand night owls. And I say this, my father-in-law and my dad both act like they are morally better than night owls because they get up early in the morning. But the thing is, they go to bed way earlier too. So we're all doing the same thing in the same amount of time. We're just doing it at different times. And so just remember what works for you and your family may not work for somebody else. And they may have comments about it. It's just like if you choose to homeschool, somebody may say, well, that's not a good idea, but maybe not for them, but for you, it's a great idea. So yeah, I would just encourage you to figure out what works for you now. Don't worry about 10 years from now because it may be different. It probably will be different. But what works for you now, ignore the naysayers. If you need encouragement or to find out if you're normal or not, join us in the community because you will discover there are other people that are doing things similarly to you and then other people that are doing things way differently than you are. So get connected with your community. And thank you so much for joining us today. Make sure to join us tomorrow for our Setting Your Pace session and then the rest of the week as we move along and kind of take you through this journey with different types of encouragement depending on the day. And if we did not get to your question, please make sure to ask that. We will continue answering these after the fact too. So drop that in the comments. We are here for you and we will be praying for you as well. So let us know if you have any prayer requests. Christy and Jen, thank you so much for participating today and sharing all your words of wisdom. I know I'm always so encouraged when I talk with you all, and hopefully for those watching, they got the same thing. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sunny.